Three times before, you have felt the terror, known the madness, lived the horror. But this is the one you've been screaming for. Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Jason is back. He moves like a shadow, dark and silent.
Sorry you changed your mind?
He never utters a word. He doesn't even seem to breathe.
Where the hell's the corkscrew?
He simply, mindlessly, mercilessly kills. But now, Jason's reign of terror is over. Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Jason's unlucky day.
So, Friday the 13th Part 3 was supposed to be the final movie in a trilogy and really the franchise ender. But there wasn't any label or title or anything to really suggest that that was true. So, after being consistently berated by critics and being mentally exhausted from societal backlash and really seeing the decline in popularity of slashers, Paramount and Frank Mancuso Jr. decided to kill Jason off for good in the final chapter. So, in 1983, they hired Joseph Zito, who was fresh off his slasher masterpiece, The Prowler. And guys, I'm going to take a little break here to talk to y'all about The Prowler. If you have never seen The Prowler, I suggest you go watch it. If you are a horror movie fan and you have never seen The Prowler, you need to go see The Prowler. You need to rent it. Do whatever you got to do, get it on VOD, go buy the Blu-ray. Man, do what you got to do. The Prowler is so freaking good. In fact, it's probably side by side with this movie when it comes to what I think are the essential 80s slashers. So they hired Joseph Zito, and he would go on to hire Barney Cohen to write the film, and then he would make the single most greatest decision that he could have possibly made to make this movie successful. And that was hire the great Tom Savini to do special effects and makeup. And that right there is probably why, at least at the minimum, that 75% of this movie is successful and is a glorious slasher because of his makeup effects. The guy just knows effects and he just knows what he's doing. And he's one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. That was like his best decision ever, was hiring Tom Savini. And they would begin filming in October of 1983 and would finish in January of 84. And it would only be like 6 weeks later that they would release on April 13th, which was Friday the 13th. Which is freaking awesome. I think that that's like the greatest thing ever that they released it on Friday the 13th for the supposed final movie in the Friday the 13th franchise. It doesn't get any better now. I wish they still did stuff like that today. And it would open in like 1,500 theaters, maybe 1,600 theaters, would gross like $11.1 million its opening weekend back in the 80s, guys. And it was the number one movie at the box office that weekend. And later on, it would end up grossing $33 million before it was taken out of theaters. And y'all, this was a $2.6 million budget. Look how much money this movie made. It didn't lose a dime, man. It nothing but profit. That's insane that it had that small of a budget but made so much money. And we find out later on that the reason why this is the reason why it got a sequel. Because remember, this was supposed to be the final movie, but it ended up being only the fourth movie in 9 films? Yeah. Never say never, guys. So as far as the story goes, and this is one of the big issues with the Friday the 13th franchise, is they got a continuity issue. And they always have, and they always will. Even though a lot of the continuity issues can be fixed very simply, they just don't care to fix them. And that's something that I can overlook, and what some fans can't overlook, but I can overlook it. So supposedly this film and part 3 take place in the same weekend. There's a lot of people that speculate that part 2 does as well. Like, supposed to be part 2 is on Friday, part 3 is on Saturday, and part 4 is on Sunday. That is the belief by fans, and that's really the continuity that the franchise has given us up to this point. This takes place immediately after the aftermath of part 3, and that's one thing that you can confirm about the continuity in this. The continuity between 2 and 3 is a little shady, but from 3 to 4, it's definitely takes place immediately after 3. So Jason is supposedly dead with an axe in his head, and they take his body along with the other bodies to the morgue. Of course, he's not dead. He wakes up pissed off, and he just starts killing everybody. And then he makes his way back towards Crystal Lake. So you meet a group of teenagers / maybe early college kids, and they're going to the lake for the weekend, and right across from their lake house is a family that actually lives there, and this is the Jarvis family. And the Jarvis family consists of Miss Jarvis, who is a single mother, her daughter, who is a little bit older, probably the same age as the college / teenage kids that are next door, and then a young boy that's probably elementary to preteen age, and he's played by Corey Feldman, and his name is Tommy Jarvis. He's the star of the movie. He ends up becoming, as far as the character of Tommy Jarvis goes, he becomes like a franchise staple. Like, from this movie and the next 2, he is like a big pivotal character in the franchise. Sort of like Jason's version of Dr. Loomis. He's just a thorn in Jason's side. You're introduced to these characters. This is a part where Friday the 13th Part 4, or the final chapter, separates itself from other slashers. Most slasher movies, and the Friday the 13th franchise is probably the most notorious for this. Most slasher movies have very weak characters. They're really just there to get hacked up by the killer, but not with this one. They actually assemble like a cast and give them enough development to where you actually sympathize with these characters, and you actually like these characters. And across the way where the teens are at partying, one of the characters that everybody that's a fan of the franchise loves, Crispin Glover's character in this movie. He is probably the most sympathetic out of all of them. The guy's just trying to make it with the ladies, man, and there ain't nothing wrong with that, but he is a dork, and I can relate to that as well. There is a scene in this movie, and it's a notorious scene, where he's trying to get with this one girl who's a twin, and they call them the Doublemint twins, but that's not really their name. He's trying to get with one of the twins, and he turns on this rock music, and I think it's like 80s hair metal, and I think it's White Line is the name of the band. So it's just this rock song's playing in the background, and he just starts doing this weird dance. And if you've seen the movie and you're a fan of the franchise, you know exactly what dance I'm talking about. It is horrible, but the girl's actually digging it because the guy's got the balls to actually get out there and dance with him in the house and everything. But it is such an awkward dance, but it ends up working. He ends up getting the girl, man. He actually gets with the girl, and anybody that can sympathize with that. And just there's another little storyline where one of the girls really likes this one guy that's in the group, and they end up finding out that they both like each other. So that story has you sympathetic towards those characters. And really, I expected, the first time I ever watched this movie, I expected the teen characters to be super weak and not relatable in the least or at all, and for the family, the Jarvis family, to be the most relatable characters in the movie. But they're about equal. The interaction with all the people in the Jarvis family is also super relatable. So it's not like this, oh, this part of the story with these characters is super weak and this one's really strong, so it's lopsided. Nah, they're both pretty equal, and they do a good job of making you sympathize with both sets of characters. So that's one thing that definitely separates it from the rest of the films in the franchise, and really slashers in general. The other big highlight of this movie is Ted White as Jason. It's probably the scariest version of Jason. Yeah, I said it. It's probably the best one too. I said it. Yeah, look, I respect the hell out of Kane Hodder. I do think Kane Hodder is the quintessential Jason Voorhees, but my favorite is Ted White. I kind of have a similar take on Michael Myers too. Like, a lot of people look at me sideways when I say that Dick Warlock is my favorite Michael Myers, because he has the sneakiness of Nick Castle, but the physicality of George P. Wilbur later on. To me, Dick Warlock set the precedent for how that character is supposed to be in that second film. And Ted White, I believe, does the same. I think when Kane Hodder took over the role as Jason, he wanted to be more like Ted White and less like the other two guys that came after Ted White. It definitely shows, because other than Kane Hodder, Ted White is definitely the most physical and intimidating version of Jason that we have seen. His physicality, his aggression, like, I really believe when I watched this movie, I was completely convinced that he was really trying to kill these kids, especially Corey Feldman, the way he handles Corey Feldman. And it turns out, I watched an interview one time where Ted White hated Corey Feldman. He hated Corey Feldman as a kid. So it was some of that aggression and physicality that he got with Corey Feldman that was real, and it showed. And I just think that he's so freaking intimidating. Like, he's running through doors. He's crushing people's faces and heads. He throws one girl out the window and she lands on top of a car and just gets completely mangled when she hits the car. I mean, he is super intimidating. If that version of Jason showed up, I'd shit my pants. He's so freaking scary. At least that's my opinion. I mean, there's versions that are scary, like Part 7's is pretty creepy, and Part 6's is pretty creepy, and Part 2's is creepy as well. But if this one showed up at my house, I'd shit my pants. I'd be scared to death. So he's definitely one of the highlights as well. And then getting to the ultimate highlight of this movie, the effects and the kills. I don't have to sit back and try to convince y'all. If y'all know who Tom Savini is, I don't have to convince y'all how good he is, because his work speaks for itself. But as far as slasher movies go, his work in slasher movies, I'd say his top three are his work in The Prowler, his work in The Burning, and his work here in Part 4. And I think that his work in this film is the best work he ever did in slashers. His kills look so real at times, like, it's scary. And I know that a lot of it had to do with him being a Vietnam War photographer. So he's actually seen death like this before. So it's amazing that he can translate that trauma that he experienced in his life and completely tie it to his effects. I think that's so amazing and shows how great of an artist he is. So it definitely shows. And I don't really have a favorite kill in this movie, because all of them are phenomenal. There's like one where it cuts away from the screen. Yeah, that one's not that great, but every kill in this movie is gnarly. Like, there's a scene, I think it's the coroner's death. Jason takes the bone saw and starts sawing his head off, and midway through stops and just twists his head all the way around. Super disgusting. Probably my favorite kill in the movie. I don't really have a favorite, but one that really sticks out with me that makes me cringe every time I see it is there's a scene, one of the characters is in the shower, and Jason comes in and he busts through the glass and he pins the guy's head against the shower tiles and starts crushing his face, and he kills him by crushing his face in, and it looks so freaking real at one point that I was like, oh my God, it makes me cringe every time I see it. So again, I do not have a definitive favorite kill in this movie, but that one's the one that makes me cringe the most. And then you have the ending, and the ending of this movie does exactly what it says it's going to do. which is kill Jason. It goes about with Corey Feldman. Him and his sister are being chased by Jason. They're the only two that are left alive. His sister's struggling, trying to keep Jason at bay. He runs upstairs. He shaves his head and comes back downstairs. And him shaving his head completely catches Jason off guard. It's almost like he's looking in a mirror. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but it works for the movie. And Jason's kind of stunned, and he really doesn't know how to handle it. So he's kind of just looking at Tommy. And while he's looking at Tommy, Tommy takes a swing and ends up knocking his mask off, which it might not have been Tommy that took the swing first. It might have been his sister. Yeah, I think his sister takes a swing, knocks his mask off, and we get to see Jason's mangled face. And at that moment, Tommy ends up taking advantage of it and slapping Jason in the face with this machete. And he goes into the side of Jason's face, and he goes about midway in. So probably from the side of his head right to the bridge of his nose. And Jason hits the ground. He falls forward, and when he falls forward, the handle of the machete hits the ground, and Jason's head just slides down this machete, and it is so freaking gnarly and just disgusting. And that is how they kill off Jason. And it was such a fitting, gruesome end. I think that Tom Savini, which he made a comment in an interview one time that he created Jason, he wanted to be the one to kill him. So this was like not really a dream come true, but something that he wanted to do. He definitely did it, and it was freaking fantastic. It's one of the best kills of the franchise. I can't speak enough about how shocking it was to see that the first time. Even though I knew that it wasn't the last movie, just knowing like this, it felt like the last movie. Even though you know for a fact it's not the final chapter, because there's freaking 8 other films. This movie definitely feels like it's the final chapter, and that was something that also to me added to how great this movie is they don't hold anything back, and they go for broke, and I liked it. I like how they went at this with we ain't got nothing to lose, and then they made a sequel. And so it made so much money that they couldn't stop, so they kept making sequels, and 9 sequels later, here we are. To me, Joseph Zito delivers one of the greatest slashers of all time, and even though it wasn't the conclusion to the franchise, it surely feels like it. It's got the best kills, characters, and possibly the scariest version of Jason ever. This movie is the best the franchise has to offer, and with that, I give Friday the 13th, the final chapter, a 5 out of 5, and his Grizzly grade guaranteed. Go pick it up. Go watch it.